All right, let's get right into it. We are all hearing nonstop about how AI is going to change the economy. But you know, the headlines, robots are taking our jobs, or AI is going to create a utopia, they just don't really get to the heart of the story. So today, we're going to break this whole thing down into 3 different levels to see what is really going on under the hood.
So this is the big question, right? How is AI actually changing the way we work? Not just in some far-off future, but right now. And what does that tell us about where we're headed? Well, the answer is so much more nuanced and honestly more fascinating than you might think. It's not just one thing, but a whole series of connected shifts happening at every single level of the economy.
So let's start at the ground level, what we're calling the task level. This is all about how AI is changing the specific things that individual people do every single day as a part of their jobs. And right away, we see this really interesting split. So you have these 2 totally opposite effects happening at the exact same time. On one hand, you've got AI automating a lot of the routine entry-level tasks. We're seeing some pretty sharp drops in jobs like junior coding roles. But for the rookies who are on the job, AI is acting like this incredible performance-enhancing tool.
I mean, just how big of a boost are we talking about here? Well, a study at the Boston Consulting Group found that when their below-average consultants started using GPT-4, their performance shot up by a staggering 43%. It's like the AI just leveled the playing field, totally compressing the skills gap between the junior and senior folks.
So why is this happening? Well, it really gets at the core of how knowledge work has been organized for, well, forever. This quote nails the old model, what the economist Louis Garicano calls management by exception. Basically, the junior people handle all the routine stuff, and only the really tricky exceptional problems get kicked up the chain to the experts. But what happens if AI can handle more of the routine stuff and help the novices with the exceptions? That entire structure just starts to wobble.
Okay, so let's move to our second level and see how this all builds up. Now we're zooming out from the individual person to look at the entire company. How is AI reshaping the very architecture of the firm itself?
For decades, there's been this basic tension in business. Do you centralize everything? Pull all the decision-making into a single headquarters to coordinate everything, like this old-school command center? Or do you decentralize and push those decisions out to the edges where the local, on-the-ground knowledge actually lives? More like this big, sprawling campus.
The classic argument for decentralizing came from the economist F.A. Hayek in this super famous 1945 paper. His big idea was that the most important knowledge isn't written down in some report at HQ. It's local, it's unspoken. It's the stuff people just know from doing their jobs day in and day out. And since you can't easily package that up and send it to the bosses, decisions should be made locally. But what if AI changes that fundamental assumption?
And this brings us to this key concept from researchers Zoe Hitzig and Eric Brynjolfsson, alienable knowledge. Basically, think of it as all that local, unspoken knowledge, but now in a form that can be transferred. It can be pulled from the edges of an organization, digitized, and shot over to the center for processing.
So how does AI actually do this? Well, first, it just supercharges the digitization of stuff we can already write down. Second, and this is really the key, it helps codify what we call tacit knowledge. Like the gut feeling of a great salesperson by analyzing just massive amounts of data. And third, it starts discovering entirely new machine-native knowledge that no human ever even knew existed.
So what happens when all that crucial knowledge is no longer stuck out on the fringes? Well, if a central AI can process all of this information, Hayek's classic argument for decentralization starts to look a lot weaker. AI could actually become the most powerful centralizing force we have seen in business in a century.
And are we seeing any hints of this in the real world? This graph shows some pretty suggestive evidence. It's tracking something called the C4 ratio. That's just the combined market share of the top 4 firms in U.S. retail. And you can see this steady upward march since the 1970s. This trend toward more concentration is something that AI could dramatically accelerate, as a few huge, centralized firms learn to use all this new alienable knowledge way better than anyone else.
And these new, centralized companies look radically different. This is a leaderboard of what they call lean AI-native companies, and just look at the revenue per employee. It's insane. Midjourney is pulling in $12.5 million for each employee. One company, Base44, apparently made $3.5 million with just one person. These are unbelievably efficient organizations built around a powerful AI core.
And they hire differently, too. As this co-founder from Gamma AI explains, they don't want a bunch of narrow specialists anymore.
They want versatile generalists, people who can use AI tools to solve problems across marketing, data, product, you name it. The AI becomes the specialist, and the humans become the agile problem solvers who direct it.
Okay, so for our last level, let's zoom out one final time to the most speculative but frankly mind-bending level. What happens to the entire economy if or when we eventually get to artificial general intelligence, AGI?
To even begin to understand this, we need a framework from the economist Pasquale Restrepo. He splits all the work in an economy into two types. You've got bottleneck work. This is the stuff that is absolutely essential for growth. Think of a crucial scientific discovery or a key engineering breakthrough. If you don't do this work, the whole economy gets stuck. Then there's accessory work. This is everything else. It's helpful, sure, but it's not a fundamental constraint on growth.
So here's the core, kind of wild idea from Restrepo's model. In a world with AGI and basically infinite compute, all of that bottleneck work eventually gets automated. And why? Well, it just doesn't make any economic sense to let the entire economy be held back by slow, scarce humans when a machine can do that critical work way, way faster. And this leads to a really fascinating paradox. First, labor's share of national income, so the slice of the whole economic pie that goes to human workers, it basically vanishes. It goes to zero. It's an economy totally dominated by AI and capital. But, and this is the crazy part, human wages don't go to zero. They actually stay positive and they keep growing. How is that even possible? It's because the economic pie itself becomes so unbelievably, unimaginably large thanks to AGI. So even though humans are only doing accessory work, their time is still valuable. And in an economy that productive, even a tiny sliver of that massive pie is still enough to make everybody better off than they were before.
All right, so after all that future gazing, let's bring it back down to earth with a very practical final problem. How do we actually measure any of this? How do we even know if this massive transformation is happening?
Well, the simple truth, as researchers like Diane Coyle and John Pokwas point out, is that our main economic stats, like GDP, they were designed for an economy of factories and farms. They were just not built to measure the impact of something like generative AI. I mean, just think about all the things our statistics are missing right now. How do you measure the massive quality improvement when an AI helps a doctor make a better diagnosis? What's the economic value of a powerful tool like ChatGPT that millions of people use for free? How do we account for the changing nature of the actual tasks people are doing at work, or the enormous data and energy that fuel these models? The truth is, right now, we're kind of flying half blind.
And that brings us to our final, really provocative thought, and it loops all the way back to that idea of centralization. All the research we've looked at today points to a future where economic power could become way more concentrated in just a few hyper-productive AI-native companies. And so we have to ask the question, if economic power centralizes, what happens to political power? Now that is a question that goes way beyond economics, and it just might be the most important one of all.